present in the UK of a Spiritualist National Union Church, which is it's not a political union, but a union affiliated with churches. And I would go around I think we have about 500 or 600 churches in around England. And I would visit many of these churches, and I would be their visiting medium. And that gave me greater confidence to be able to work with my spirit guides and to expand my mediumship and to sort of get it polished. And so for a number of years there, I was very involved with committees and running my own church. And we had a little primitive Methodist church, and primitive was the operative word, you know. It had been around for many, many years. And when I first went, there was a congregation of about, probably 15, 20. But as you often find when you're working with spirit, it's like that old movie, Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And we started to find people coming into our church, seekers and people coming that had had tragedy in their lives. But we managed to get a wonderful group of people together that became the committee that run the church. And we ended up with a congregation of 200 people that started coming to this little church. And we started to go from 1 day a week of being open to 7 days a week. And so in my early teens, where most kids of my age were either running, chasing girls or off to the discotheque, I was running this church and was counseling people from the age of 16 onwards. As time's gone on, I was very lucky to be able to meet many wonderful, fascinating mediums, from physical mediums to trance mediums. I had the opportunity to shake hands with a man that had been dead 150 years. I had the opportunity to see trumpets flying around the room and voices coming from the ceiling. I got to see some wonderful trance mediums and talk to people, again, that had been passed from this life many, many years. I became very good friends with a gentleman called Gordon Higginson, and you will find him online if you look up Gordon M. Higginson, English medium. And he was the president of the Spiritualist National Union for over 22 years. Gordon was perhaps one of the leading mediums in the world because he was a physical medium, he had all the gifts of the spirit. And I was lucky to spend time with him and to work with him. And being with someone of this caliber, when you're with a very developed medium, it's like plugging yourself into a socket, because you can take the power, the energy from them, and it can help to develop, accentuate, and strengthen your own mediumship. And so to have someone like this was quite phenomenal. During this time, we had a lady come visit our church by the name of Billie Halliday, not to be confused with Billie Holiday, of course. And she was going to do an evening of flower clairsentience, flower reading. And I'd not seen this happen before. And we were all to bring a flower to the church and to place them on the rostrum where she would read them. So I was rather interested in this because I'd never seen spirit communication through flowers. And she would pick up a bunch of flowers and she would connect with spirit through the flowers, and she would give a reading to the person whom the flowers belonged to. And this sort of fascinated me because I've always been, as a Sagittarian, I've always been very connected to Mother Nature and the animal kingdom. And so one day I decided that I would try this. And I started to work with flowers. And I found that I had the ability to be able to connect through the flower, not knowing who the flower belonged to, but to connect on a psychic level and then on a spiritual level. So I was able to connect psychically with the person and find out what was going on in their life, in their physical existence. And then I was able to also to make contact with the spirit world and to be able to prove the continuity of life after death. So I began to work with the flowers, and I would travel around and do these flower demonstrations. So much so that I think it's probably been about 40 years now that I've been working with flowers. And here in San Diego, I'm known as a flower medium. But it was one of those experiences that enriched my mediumship and was allowed me really to connect with people that may have a fear of spirit communication. But when you're working with flowers, it seemed to act as a bit of a buffer where people were not quite as frightened when we were working with the flowers. It was something which eased them in to the philosophy of spiritualism, of which I was involved in. Well, as years went by, when I was in my early 20s, I met someone in England through a series of events, and I was invited to come to California. And I came to California in the early 80s, and I got involved with a church in San Diego, so much so that they wanted me to come back and be their assistant pastor. Well, I went back to England after being here a year to determine if I really wanted to come into and leave my country and to emigrate. And I was in mixed minds because all my family lives in England, and it was a big move to leave everyone behind. But I remember the prophecy that was given to me in my early teens, that one day you would go and live and work in the United States. And so I took the plunge, and I came over to America in 1983 was when I came here permanently. And through that time, as we often find for those of you that work with spirit and have had these, you'll find that the spirit will guide you into situations or to meet people. And I was guided when I arrived in California, in San Diego. One day I was walking along the street. I didn't have a car at that time. And I passed a restaurant, and there was a stack of magazines there called the Resources magazines. And I picked one up, and I was reading through it, and I saw that there was a metaphysical church just up the road from where I lived. And so I got my roommate to take me there and drop me off. And I'd not actually been to a metaphysical church before, but I went in and they warmly greeted me. And it seemed very much like a spiritualist church. And they had their service, and I enjoyed it. And I went a few times, but then they were moving to the other side of the city, and I didn't have transportation. But the pastor, Barbara O'Malley, she gave me a book. And she said, I'd like you to have that. I feel inspired to give you this. And it was called The Psychic Experiences of a Catholic Priest. And it was all about this Catholic priest that had all these wonderful experiences from the spirit world. Then he had the dilemma, was he to stay in the Catholic Church, having all this knowledge? Wonderful book. Anyway, one day, it was in October, I went up from my condo, and we could sunbathe on the top. And here I was, a British person sunbathing in October, where normally we're dealing with snow in Great Britain. And this was, but I put the book on the side, and I meaning to read it. And I was just a little bit sunbathing. I heard this lady's voice say, well, that's a rather strange book for you to be reading, isn't it? So on my little English humor, I said, well, maybe I'm a rather strange person. So we got chatting, and I told her that I worked in the psychic and spiritual field. And she said, oh, this place is littered with psychics. Let me go and get my roommate. So she brought this chap up, and he told me about an organization, a group that met on a Wednesday night in San Diego. And so I went along there, and again, was warmly welcomed. And at the end of this service, they invited people to come up. And I went up, and the lady said, well, are you sure you can do this? I said, well, I think possibly, yes. And so I started to give readings from the platform. And after that, I was inundated because I was new and I had an accent, and everyone wanted to know where I was from and all the rest of it. Well, that led me then to the church in San Diego, where I became very involved. And from that, people got to know me. And I became established then in San Diego, where I lived for a number of years. And then I moved up to Harmony Grove, which was a spiritualist community in Escondido, which at that time had been around for 118 years. And I was able to purchase a house there, and I lived there for 28 years as a full-time practicing medium. And I have been a full-time practicing medium now for almost 50 years. Don't forget, I was born at a very early age. And in that time, I've had experiences that, beyond a shadow of doubt, have proved to me that life does go on. The spirit world has always guided me in my work, and I found it very rewarding. It keeps me very busy, keeps me out of trouble, and I've seen some wonderful things happen where I've seen people's lives change through the power of the spirit. And I know that when you're working as a medium, it's not like being an electrician or a plumber. It's a great responsibility because you're dealing with people's lives, and you're not necessarily working to an everyday schedule. When the spirit world call, then you have to go, you see. So it's been an exciting journey for me, insofar as that none of my brothers are psychically inclined at all. But as I said, my parents have psychic potentially. My mother's seen spirit in her home. She's seen physical phenomena in the family home. And so it really does run through the family. You always find that mediums, if you look back in your family history, you'll usually find that there has been either a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle that has either been psychic or has had some mediumistic qualities, abilities. And so you often find that mediums are born into mediumistic families. And that's what happened to me. And so here we are now in 2020. I've been in California now for about almost 36 years and still keep very busy. Most of my work today is clairvoyant work. And when people come to see me, usually I'm working on a clairvoyant faculty. I don't do too much healing today because I believe that if you are working as a healer, you need to be doing that on a regular basis. It's not something you can take on and take off. I think to maintain the quality of the work, you've got to maintain being a healer on a regular basis, and I really didn't have the time for that. But I did run a physical circle on 2 or 3 occasions, and we had some rather interesting experiences with that. I had a good friend who was a transfiguration medium and had the wonderful experience of seeing the spirit people transfigure on her face, where her face completely changed with the ectoplasm, and you would see someone completely different looking at you. And so I've been very lucky to grow up in a time where there was still some great mediums around that had these wonderful abilities. And that was a wonderful way to build my foundation as a medium, to know that these great people are out there. So, as I said, I'm known now as the flower medium, and I keep pretty busy with my flower readings all over San Diego. I used to go up to LA, but it's a bit far now. And the wonderful thing about being a flower medium, when you're working with flowers, I'll give you an example. I usually have a group of about 10 people that will get together, and they will pick a flower either from their garden or they'll buy it from a florist. I ask them to hold the flower for at least 10 minutes, and then they will put the flower on a table, and I will not know who the flowers belong to, and I'll come in, and then I will pick up each flower individually. I will tell them what the colors mean to them spiritually, and then I'll start to connect with them on a mediumistic level. And I remember one time there was a flower I was working with, and there was a group of young people in this group, and I heard this lady's voice say, and pardon my French, she says, "She's still got my bloody ashes." And I, oh, now how am I going to pass this on? Now, unbeknownst to me, this group knew one another quite well. And so I said, well, there's a lady here, and she's stating that you've still got her ashes, and you don't know what to do with them. And there was gasp of, because they all knew that this lady that put this evening together, her mum's ashes were sitting there on the mantelpiece. And so it was rather endearing that the mother come through and said, look, you can do with the ashes whatever you want, because I'm not in the pot there, I'm here. I'm still a living, loving personality, and I'm still watching over you. And then I remember one time this lovely hydrangea, and it was a beautiful hydrangea, deep blue in color. And there was, at the side of it was a hydrangea that had died. It was brown. And as I was working in the reading, we were talking about this person's life going through a major change, that a part of her life was dying and moving away. Well, she was in the middle of a divorce. And so it's rather interesting what you can see within the flowers. Sometimes I've seen in the main stalk of the flower, it might have a little bend towards the flower head. And I found that by tuning into that, we find that that person has had problems around the top part of the spine. And so quite often, when you blend spiritually with a flower, it will open itself up to you. And it can tell you a wonderful story connected with the person the flower belongs to. So there really are no limits to what and how the spirit world can connect with us. I remember a chap once came to our church and he handed out raffle tickets. And I thought, goodness me, what's he going to do with this? And he kept the second part of the ticket. And from the platform, he read out the number of the raffle ticket and then he read for that person. So that was something, again, that I'd not seen before. But it's interesting that when you stretch yourself and you don't put limits on yourself, really, everything is possible. Everything is possible. Now then, what else would you like to know? Maybe I've talked for half an hour. I ought to run the whole evening.
Well, you can, but does anybody have any questions? Anything you'd like to say? Daisy. There.
Hi, I'm also a medium.
Yes.
And I do my mediumship by listening. That's how I hear spirit. And sometimes I do spirit art, symbols mostly, but I'm learning to do faces. As I'm developing, I'm feeling that I'm really connecting to the feelings and emotions of spirit more than I used to, instead of the facts. Is that good?
What you're probably doing here is that you're increasing your clairsentient faculty. And when you're working clairsentiently, of course, you're going to feel, you're going to sense. Now, we all, in our early stages, will use the clairsentient faculty in that we get a hunch, we get a feeling. And when the spirit people move more into your auric field, if I'm working clairsentiently, where I can't see the spirit person, I will have a sense of their health and how they passed from this world. I'll have a sense of their age. I'll have a sense of their personality. And it's that personality that comes through the sensing mechanism. So that's a very important aspect of your mediumship, because we have to be sensitive to the spirit world, but we have to be able to blend with them. And really what happens is, let's say I was connecting with your mother. Well, as she steps into my aura, I literally become your mother, in the sense that I feel her, I sense her, and she's able to project to me certain informations on a clairsentient faculty that would help prove her reality. So that it will increase, and they will test you in many ways, your spirit guides. They will try different methods with you to see which is your strongest. The one challenge I find with a lot of people wanting to develop, they want all the gifts at once. And I want to be a trance medium. I want to be a healer. I want to be a speaker. In the olden days, if I can use that term now, considering I was born at an early age, we used to have to sit in the circle, and we would sit and sit and sit in the power, and we would allow the spirit guides to influence the way in which we work. What's happening a lot today is that people are more or less deciding how they want to work, and they're not giving themselves over to the spirit guides. And I think that really is a mistake, because they're on the other side and they know how to work. and they know how to use the power. And I think really we're better served if we built a stronger relationship with our guides.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I basically hear. I just listen, and
Okay.
I have chosen, and I've told Spirit, I don't want to see Spirit. I prefer not to see Spirit.
Okay.
And I am very visual, and I think it would distract me from the message.
Okay, that's fine. And if you've made that request, of course, they will honor that request unless there's a great need for you to see. Now, when you say you hear, when you're hearing, are you hearing as you're hearing me, or is it a voice from within?
It's a voice from within, but
Yes.
I can tell that it is a male or a female, and I can encourage them with thoughts, not really questions, more like thoughts of, you know, maybe leading them in a direction where they're, if I can't understand them, for example, I'll ask them to help me draw it.
Yes, yes.
Or, and mostly I write. I just write. I usually write 6 sides of a paper for each reading I do.
Okay.
And I really don't know what I'm writing until
So
I read it.
It's an automatic or inspirational aspect of writing then, yes?
Yeah.
Good, good. Well, the great thing is that you're giving your spirit guides the opportunity to use you in a variety of ways. And I think that how long have you been involved with this?
Well, informally, maybe 10 years, but formally, maybe 2.
Okay.
But I do online readings for people I don't know all over the world.
Oh, great.
So I don't
Great.
really have a connection, a personal connection to them, you know?
Yes, yes, that's wonderful. Well, we need all the channels we can get. Goodness knows the world needs these lights. And so I think this, in all that's going on in the world today with this pandemic, I really believe this is a major wake-up call for humanity. And I believe it's an opportunity for us to become lights into the world. And I think many people now are being awakened onto a higher spiritual level so they can do the work that they've come in to do.
Thank you very much.
Christina has a question about your spirit guides, Chris.
Yes.
She needs to unmute, and I see Peg joined us. Welcome, Peg.
Oh, hi.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, hi. I heard you say that a medium told you about the Chinese spirit guide, and I was wondering how you developed that connection, because I've been told that I have a native guide, but I don't know how to connect. So
okay, well, I also have a Native American Indian. He's called Happy Bear, and I have a monk who's called John. Now, first of all, there are many mediums that will work quite well and don't know who they're working with, and don't have that connection with their spirit guide. The spirit people do not always want to be the center of attention. For them, it's the work that's important, you see, not who they are. So there are many people that may have been well known in this world and want to do the work, but realize that their title of how they were known here sometimes can get in the way, because in a sense, if you say like Jesus, more people now are affiliated with Jesus and they've forgotten the message. So they adore the messenger but forgotten the message. And the spirit guides often are more concerned about the work. What I would recommend, if you want to have a deeper connection or know who your spirit guides are, then I would say that when you're in your quiet meditation, I would ask them if they wouldn't mind revealing to you who they are and giving you some information about them. Now, if they deem that this is going to help you in your mediumship, they will do so. If they don't, they will not. It really, everyone's an individual, as I say. Now, you'll find some mediums, of course, like Estelle Roberts, who was probably, again, one of the greatest mediums we had in Great Britain. Her guide, Red Cloud, would entrance her. And so she had a very, very close relationship with her guide. And when she went in places like the Royal Albert Hall and she would speak in front of up to about 3,000 people. She would be totally entranced, and he would speak through her. The same with Maurice Barbanel, who was the medium for Silver Birch. That same sort of thing, that there are certain mediums that have come in that will have a very deep personal relationship with their medium, with their guide, because that's how their mediumship is going to be in this lifetime. That's the specific work they've come to do, you see.
Okay, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Now, when you were speaking about the book about the Catholic priest, I saw Sister Rosemary had a great big smile.
Ah,
I think
are you familiar with the book?
No, that was my question. What is the name of the book?
Now you're going to ask. Now, I may get the pronunciation wrong. It was something like the psychic experiences of a Catholic priest, Johannes Greaves or Grimm. It was, you see, it's so many years ago now, but I think it was called, was it called How to Communicate with the Spirit World, Its Laws and Purposes, the Psychic Experiences of a Catholic Priest. And I'm almost, it was Johanna, and I'm not sure if it was Greb or Greaves, but it was, you might have to sort of go through and check out books that involve a psychic priest. But it's been so many years, unfortunately, since I had that book. And my home burnt down in 2014, and I lost all my old books, unfortunately. So,
I'll look it up.
yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey. You have certainly been blessed, especially with Gordon Higginson as your mentor.
Are you familiar with him?
I am, yes. I've heard some of his talks.
Yes, you can. Yes, you go online. I went to work at Stansted Hall, which is a spiritualist college in Essex, and so I got to work with Gordon there, which was a wonderful experience. And of course, you can go there for courses. I spent a week there. They had a Manchester week there, and so I was on the Manchester Council there of spiritualists, and so I got to work there for a whole week. So it's a lovely mansion in its own grounds. Yes.
My guide is also a monk. He was my spiritual director for 35 years and transitioned in 2015.
Yes.
And he's one of the monks from Big Sur. I don't know if you've ever been to the Camaldolese Hermitage in Big Sur.
I'm familiar with it, but no, I've not had the pleasure of going there. But it's not uncommon, of course, that some mediums will have either a family member that becomes a guide for them, or as you, a mentor in this lifetime that wants to carry on the work. And I get this quite often with writers and people that work so closely together that when one of them passes over, they want to come back and help their partner to finish the work.
Yes. Well, you know, mine has this very unusual touch. I call it touch tone communication, and it's sort of a form of automatic writing, but sometimes I can't discern really what he's saying, and it comes the next day in either a communication by email or you know, messages like that. So I'm still learning.
Okay. Yeah, you know that we have what's called clairgustience, which is a psychic sense of smell. And I remember a very good friend of my mother's who lost her husband. And like my father, he was a pipe smoker. And one evening after he passed, she was sitting watching the television, and she had a photograph of him on top of the television. And all of a sudden, the photograph fell over flat on its face. And then she got this strong smell of his pipe smoke. And she went to bed that evening, and she could hear this music playing. And she thought, where on earth is this music coming from? And she went downstairs to follow the sound of the music, and it was coming out of the garage. And when she went into the garage, there was this old radio that was playing. Now, in itself, that's nothing remarkable, except it had no batteries and it wasn't plugged into the mains. But there it was playing away. And so her husband was determined that he would let her know that that he was okay and still watching over her. So it never surprises me when I hear how the spirit world has reached out to someone in a rather unique way to prove who they are, because giving them the opportunity, they will do that. The one thing that I think does prevent the spirit people from connecting with us is grief and fear. When you've got someone that's lost someone and they're in tremendous grief, it's rather like an eggshell that's around them. It's rather difficult for the loved ones to get around them until the grief subsides. And the same with fear. Fear can be very debilitating to spiritual communication, just as negativity is as well. If you've got someone that you're working with that's very in that, well, show me what you can do type situation, it's just not going to work. And I've experienced this a number of times. I can walk into a group of people and immediately I can feel if someone there is of a negative persuasion, you'll feel it straight away. It hits you right in the solar plexus. So, yes.
Marilyn has a question in the chat that I guess she can't, doesn't have a microphone, and I'm going to read it for her. But before I do that, I wanted to share that little half-second clip, sound clip that.
Oh yes.
Yeah, some years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, maybe more. It was 10 years ago. It was 2010. I drove down to see Chris. That was probably the last time I saw him in person. And I brought a cassette tape, sealed, brand new sealed, and handed it to him, and he unsealed it and put it in his cassette player and recorded our session. And on the way home, I put it into my tape player in the car. And at the very beginning, there was something that was not part of our session that either of us heard. So it's only a half-second long. And then you'll hear him start to speak. But this is what I heard. And if you can't hear it here, I'll share screen and do it. That's all there is to it. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I had it, let's see, maybe this is the same one. Yeah, I had it, that was sped up actually. There was the original, let me just see if I still got it.
I would say it sounds like Mommy.
It's that, yes, but that's the sped up one. Oh,
yeah.
I thought I had them both here. Oh, here. This is how it actually sounded.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that one more time. So you hear Chris start to speak afterwards. And that was like kind of
got your attention, that, didn't it?
Driving on the freeway, I thought, oh, wow, that was very cool.
I've also, just getting into that, I've also had experiences where, because I do, if a client at that time when we didn't have the cell phones, I'd often record using the tape recorder, I still do today. And there have been times when I've had a client's tape session tape backwards. And then there's been times when there's been nothing on the tape at all. So when you're dealing with electrical apparatus and you're working with the spirit world, all sorts of things can and of course do happen.
Yeah, to me it sounded like I think, but then it was sped up and it sounds like Mommy. So I don't know.
Yes, yes.
Right. So here's what Marilyn says. I'm a medium, dowser, Reiki healer. One of my dowsing teachers, who is a medium, told us that one of our jobs is to cross spirits over into the light. The second I set the intention, they started coming in. At times I do not want them around me, just like a minute ago. I was told to set boundaries, but they still come in when I tend to be busy or in the middle of something. Any tips?
Okay. There's no doubt that because there are a limited number of people that are sensitive to the spirit world, they're going to take any and all opportunities, try to get in and make contact with the physical world. When I'm working sometimes, particularly in the flower reading groups, I'll get the odd person on the other side that will jump the queue because they want to get in and take that opportunity. Usually they're very patient and very organized, but they know that there are limited spaces of time that they can get in. I think the important thing is to remember you are always in control of you. You are always in control of you. When I work with my mediumship, I only work in the mornings, and the afternoons are for me and my physical world. And that's the boundaries that I've set. And I think that you need to go into your quiet meditation, and you need to talk to your spirit guides that work with you, and request that they only come to you when you are opening up and when you wish to work with them, and not before. And you should have what in the past was called a gatekeeper. This is a spirit guide that usually will, I hate to use the word protect, because I've always believed not necessarily in an evil force, but I believe that as above, so below. I believe there are spirits that are undeveloped, just like there are undeveloped souls in the physical body. There are people that have gone over and have not changed their ways. And so you might have someone that's an alcoholic in this lifetime that draws alcoholic people to them from the spirit world that are close to the earth plane. So we have to be mindful, and that's why whenever we're working, I always feel we should say a little prayer, not for anything from a religious aspect, but it's just to set the order, to set the intent of what you're doing. But I think, again, you've got to come back to the point, you are in control of you. Now, as mediums, we're not always going to be able to shut out 100%. If there's an emergency or they want to use you, they're going to do that. I remember doing a healing of a lady's finger in a nightclub when Grace Jones was blaring out of the speakers. But they used me at that time. There was a need for that. So you have the greater power, and you've got to assert that. And so I would say have a chat with your spirit guides, and just let them know that you're not going to entertain any type of communication outside the time frame that you set. Intent is everything. There's nothing worse than you get someone developing their spiritual and psychic abilities, and I've seen this, and they're open 24 hours a day. And as with any type of work, if you're going to do that work 24/7, it's going to deplete you and make you ill. This work also, because you're using, although you're using your psychic abilities, it still emanates from you. It's still taking a power from you. And that you've got to be able to recharge your batteries. That's why I only work in the mornings and have the afternoons for my everyday human existence.
You know, on this question of helping people to cross over, helping spirits, you know, you hear that from some people, and others say that we never die alone, that there's always somebody there to
Yes.
welcome you, and then
Yes.
others say there are lost souls. So
yeah, yeah. This is it. There are people that have not had very good family relationships. There are people that have come from broken homes, and there are people that can be very angry in this lifetime and have led very difficult lives, that maybe have gone into a drug addiction or into alcoholism. And when these people pass over, they are somewhat in a confused state, because not many people consider that there may be a life after this. And so some people, and like your daughter, in a sense, that went over very tragically, there are people that are murdered, and people that go through accidents. And so some people literally are thrown into the spirit world. And I think for those people, it does take a little adjustment, rather than someone that's lived their life to the full and then passed over naturally. That there's a different set of circumstances. And I think sometimes there are certain souls, not everyone, but there are some souls that do need the help of those that are still in the physical body, because sometimes a person can pass over, and because they've passed in their sleep, they don't know they've passed over. And so they continue remaining in the home that they've lived in perhaps for many years, going about their business. And what happens, of course, the house gets sold and newcomers come in. And to that person that's passed over doesn't know they have, these are intruders. And so they don't understand what's happening. And so quite often when you've got a haunting in a house, it's because that person has not been able to move on. And a medium has an ability to act as a bridge where it can still communicate with that soul, because usually they're on the astral plane, and the astral plane is the first rung of the ladder in the spirit world. When we pass over, we go into the astral level. And the astral level is very much like the earth plane. And that's where we will, is like what we call the way station before you move on to your spiritual destination. But souls that have passed on traumatically tend to remain in the astral level. So they're still very much close to the earth plane. And so a medium has the ability, through the help of their guides, to be able to connect with that soul and help them to understand what's happened, and to help them to look for the light. And if they look around in the light, they'll find that there are people there that they may recognize that are wanting to help them. And this is what happens. Now, there's a book out that was called 30 Years Among the Dead by Dr. Carl Wickland. And he was, I think he was a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist, I can't remember, but his wife was a medium. And she would often go into trance, and she would become taken over by these souls. And he was able, with his ability, was able to help these souls move on. And it's a rather interesting book if you want to read it, regarding souls that have had difficulty moving on. But under many cases, a person's going to be met by a family member and is going to be helped back into the spirit world to take them home. So on most occasions, no one is left alone. It's a very natural experience, like moving from one room into another. And usually either your mother, father, or your favorite grandmother or grandfather will be there waiting for you. So yes, usually you are helped by family members. And a lot depends. I mean, if I was to pass over, of course, I would have knowledge of life after death. But there are certain people that have never, as I said, never considered, or they've been part of a religious body who have assumed that life was meant to be this way. What was rather interesting, Embraced by the Light, Linda, I was going to say Edie, Linda, I forget what her second name is. She wrote this book of where she went to the spirit world. She had this experience of a death, an out-of-body experience. And when she went to the spirit world, she met Jesus, and she met the disciples, and she had this wonderful religious experience. Well, we find out that, of course, she was, I believe she was a Mormon. And so you will find that people that hold very strong religious beliefs, that will color their initial experience as they move into the spirit world. But as they spend more time there, the reality begins to open up to them of what life is really like on the other side.
That was Betty Edie.
That's it, Betty, thank you, Betty Edie, that was it, yes. Okay, Elizabeth, Betty, okay, yes, absolutely. Yes, so that's what happens. Anything else? Any other questions?
Any last questions? Anyone have anything they'd like to say? Kathleen.
Carol puts her hand up. Carol and I had the pleasure of working together not very long ago.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. You told it with a lot of passion, and
it's a brief synopsis. So.
Yes, but is really touching.
Okay.
I have a question about the work that you do. Are you able to connect with people's spirit guides rather than, let's say, deceased loved ones to help get direction?
There are times when the spirit guide will come forward and I'm able to relay information. Requests can be made, but it's not always a guarantee. It's just like with, someone coming to me wanting to connect with a certain relative. can't guarantee that. It's only if the relative wishes to communicate. So yes, there certainly are occasions where we can look into that and make a request for a spirit guide to come forward and to make their presence known.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Carol, did you have something? Unmute. You're mute.
We still can't hear you.
Okay.
There you are.
Yeah, well, two things I was just one thing is I did have a reading with Chris. So Sheila's not the only one in the group that's had a reading with him, and it was a wonderful reading. I cherish that reading. But my question, you talked about Gordon Higginson.
Yes.
Yes. So do mediums like you ever hear from their teachers that have passed over? I mean, do you ever?
Right. I get the gist of your question, yes. There are times when I will be aware of people that I've known on the other side and had connections with. But to be honest with you, they've got more important work to do than coming and popping in to see me. Because when you're a medium on this side, the work doesn't end because you pass over. The work still continues on, but in a rather different manner to which we're working today. Gordon believed, and I tend to take this belief as well, that mediums are reincarnated souls, that we continue on the work and have done over many, many lifetimes. And so I would agree with that. But I have a connection with Gordon that has not been severed because of his physical passing. And I think when you are mediumistic, that connection you have, that love, that affection, that is always there. And so just as if you would think of your mother or your father, if you had a fond connection with them, immediately you're thinking of them, that like goes out like a light, and they are aware that you are thinking of them or speaking of them, and they often will send that back, that love back to you to say, yes, I'm aware that you're thinking of me. So yeah, that connection is often there.
That's really nice.
Yes, yes.
Dana had put in the chat a link to the book about the priest, and I'm shortening.
Oh, she's found it, has she?
Yes, so I've just put the shorter link in. It might be easy to find.
Remind me the title.
The title was Communication.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, you got it. Communication with the spirit world of God, its laws and purpose. Personal experiences of a Catholic priest.
There you go.
Excellent. That's the one. And you'll find it it was a wonderful, wonderful book. And the things that happened to him in his life. And if you want to read some great books, my advice would be to get 50 Years a Medium, Estelle Roberts, The Teachings of Silver Birch, and there are many books out there on Silver Birch. Yeah. This is Spiritualism by Maurice Barbanel. What else? The Unobstructed Universe by Stuart Edward White and the Betty books that he also wrote. The University of Spiritualism by Boddington. That's another phenomenal book. That might keep you going for a little while there.
Yeah, Michael has written also in the chat that Wikipedia has an article on Gordon. And most people here, I think everybody here is familiar with Gordon.
Oh, good. Yes, he was a wonderful medium. He lived in Longton in the Potteries, which was about an hour and a half drive from where I lived in Cheshire. And so I served the old church. The old church now is gone, unfortunately. It had to make way for a freeway, and they built a new church, which I've been down to. But I served a number of churches there in the Potteries, because, of course, Longton is the Potteries where all the delf ware and all your wonderful pottery came from, you see, in that area. And so they called it the Potteries. But yes, he was every Christmas morning, he would do a trance session with his guide, who I think was called Light, and he would give a demonstration. Of course, he has a guide that is called Paddy, and if you go on to his link, you can listen to Paddy talking. Oh, and while I remember, some of you may be familiar with Leslie Flint. Leslie Flint, of course, was the voice medium, and I'm sure you know of his link there. You can go and listen to many of the voices that spoke through his mediumship there online. So there's a lot of information there.
Sorry, there are several YouTube videos of Gordon.
Yes, there are. Correct. Yeah. Yes, where he's at various churches and organizations. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you want to,
yes,
it's pretty interesting to listen to, as is Leslie Flint.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Yes.
I think Brian Hurst was connected to Leslie Flint.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I unfortunately I didn't get to see Leslie. Leslie lived in London, and I had a friend of mine who went to sit with him. I had wonderful experiences with him, but unfortunately I didn't get to sit with him. I've had the pleasure of sitting with about 7 physical mediums and a transfiguration medium, and also a direct voice medium. So I've had the pleasure of being able to do that in my journey, which is a wonderful. If you've never had the opportunity to sit with a physical medium, it's a wonderful experience. That the energy is like electricity, and when the spirit people come in and they show themselves, it changes your life. Changes your life.
You've been around the block.
You could say that, or 2. Yes.
Right.
I'm a small medium at large.
That's it. I'm going to stop the recording now.